Aloha and welcome to Maui Huliau Foundation's Climate Literacy Virtual Classroom. My name is Lily Solano and I'm the Program Director here at Maui Huliau Foundation. We offer a number of environmental education programs for youth throughout Maui County, ages 12 to 18. Programs include our Filmmaking Club, Leadership Council, and different initiatives with zero waste in the community. This school year, we decided to launch these virtual classrooms to provide students with the opportunity to learn about climate change. In this course, you will learn all about climate change, what causes it, the impacts it will have in Hawaii and around the world, and most importantly, what we can all do about this global problem. In this first lesson, we're going to be talking about the global carbon cycle and how human activities have affected this cycle. So let's take a look at carbon. What is carbon? Carbon is the sixth element on the periodic table. It's found in all living things and it's very common, and it exists in many forms. Pure solid forms of carbon are diamond and graphite. It's also stored in plants, absorbed as CO2 through photosynthesis. It's found in the soil where it can be used by plants. In our bodies from the food we eat, we then breathe out a form of carbon. Carbon exists as a part of a gas in the air. Can you guess which one? If you guessed carbon dioxide, you are correct. There is a lot of carbon in what we call fossil fuels. So let's take a look at what those are. So what are fossil fuels? Coal, oil, and natural gas, or very concentrated forms of carbon that humans burn for energy. You're probably most familiar with the gas that you put in your car. They are called fossil fuels because they come from well fossils. Fossil fuels form from land in the case of coal, or marine plants and animals, which with heat and pressure over hundreds of millions of years formed into very dense and energy-rich carbon sources, which we now use to power our world. Before the dinosaurs, and during that period, many giant plants died in swamps. Over millions of years, the plants were buried underwater and in dirt. The heat and the pressure turned those dead plants into coal. Natural gas and petroleum, the other forms of fossil fuels, were formed very similarly but primarily came from tiny marine animals and plants. For a more in-depth understanding of fossil fuels, watch the video Fossil Fuels 101 in the Materials folder. So even though fossil fuels are a great source of energy, there's a big downside. When we burn them, we release all of these hundreds of millions of years of stored carbon back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Let's take a closer look at the global carbon cycle. Carbon is always moving between living things, the ocean, the atmosphere, and changing forms. The cycle is made up of sinks and sources. Sinks absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and store carbon. Sources release it into the atmosphere. So let's take a look at an example. Plants, for example, take in carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. This is an example of a carbon sink. Animals and humans produce carbon dioxide through the process of respiration or breathing. You remember, we breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. This is an example of a carbon source. Now, let's take a look at how humans have changed the carbon cycle. As we mentioned, one of the most important ways is by burning fossil fuels. Deforestation, or the clearing of forests, impacts the carbon cycle. The clearing of land for livestock also alters the carbon cycle. Taking a look at this graphic, if you see all those arrows going up into the atmosphere, that is carbon dioxide being released or introduced into that atmosphere. So why does it matter how much CO2 is in the atmosphere? As we will see in the next unit, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases trap the sun's heat in the atmosphere. So having too much CO2 in the atmosphere is the main cause of the Earth getting too warm. So in this part, you're going to be completing 4 activities. The first activity is the carbon cycle game. In this activity, you will travel through different reservoirs and learn how carbon moves and changes form. The second is the Carbon Sinks and Sources Quizlet activity, where you'll learn about the different sinks and sources and have the opportunity to play games and test yourself. Carbon on the Move will provide you a visual of carbon moving from one source to another. And the Earth's Game of Tetris video will explain how carbon moves and what happens when too much is introduced into the atmosphere. After completing all 4 activities, take the Part 1 quiz before starting on the next part.